he went up the mountain. And after he sat down, his disciples came to him. Then he began to speak and talk and say, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Christ.
Once there was a very wealthy man named Bob who was on his deathbed. He knew soon would be the moment when he would come to his end. And he knew that people always said, "Well, you can't take it with you, Bob." But he was determined to find a way to beat the system. So he called together 3 of his closest friends, and he gave to each one an envelope containing a huge sum of money. And the assignment was that at his funeral, when that day came, each friend was to walk up to the casket and place his envelope in the casket next to Bob's body, and by golly, he would take it with him. The day of the funeral arrived, and each of Bob's friends proceeded to pay his last respects to their departed comrade. The first walked up to the casket, a slow tear from one eye, and placed the envelope in next to Bob's body. And then came the next friend, who got all the way up but broke apart into pieces once he got to the casket, sobbing uncontrollably, and placed his envelope in next to Bob's body. And the third friend, he walked casually up to the casket, and he placed his envelope in there as well and returned to his seat, seemingly unaffected. And so later at the reception, the 2 who had been crying were busy consoling one another. And the third friend came over and asked why they were so upset. And they said, honestly and selfishly, that they just couldn't believe how much money they had lost. They had it in their hands, and they put it in that casket and let it go. The third friend just smiled. And the other 2 said, well, how come you're not so upset? You're no better than we are. How come you're not so upset about putting your envelope in? He said, because I wrote Bob a check for the amount that I had promised. Bob's attempt to take it with him failed, especially in light of these supposed friends and the one who outsmarted him. You can't take it with you. Well, the gospel gives us a slightly different message about taking it with us. The gospel says that we can take it with us in one very particular instance, one very particular kind of thing that we can take with us. And it is not things at all. Because we are promised a bodily resurrection. And so this existence that you and I have does not find its final end when we are laid to rest, but we are promised something more, that we take this life and our existence here with us in some mystical and mysterious way, not knowing or having the foggiest idea what it might look like. We can take it at face value and think it's going to be folks just like you and me, that we look just like ourselves. But remember, Jesus' post-resurrection body walked through walls. So we're talking about a different kind of existence, but existence nonetheless. The general resurrection, the life everlasting that we claim to believe every time we recite the creed, are so foreign to our understanding that they at times seem more like the stuff of fantasy. The revelation to John from which we heard today is full of just such imagery. Heavenly worship with the company of all the angels and the saints, all in God's presence. Those images presented to us seem like they're straight out of myth and legend. And we always, in our modern, rational mindsets, discount myth and legend. But myth and legend have always been ways of explaining the unexplainable. When our human language reaches its limits in describing the ultimate life of God, we turn to a different genre to try to express what we cannot ultimately express. And so how we contend with those fantastical images, well, that is an important question for us. Do we understand them literally in their face value? Do we take them and throw them aside, saying they're simply human creations attempting to explain the unexplainable? Do we use them as tools to point us toward a deeper, more profound reality? Or do we choose not to deal with them at all because it's simply too difficult to try to wrap our head around those kinds of things? That's often our coping mechanism for things that challenge us. Another is to make light of the things that challenge us. How many times have we all been caught laughing at inopportune, inappropriate moments because that was the only response we knew? It was too uncomfortable to actually sit in the weight and pain of the moment. And we do it subconsciously as well. It's not just those awkward moments. And it's like on the eve of this feast day of All Saints, in which we confront head on that otherworldly concept of the company of the saints. And on the night before, we make light of it, and we dress our kids up like monsters and superheroes, and we send them out for a silly party. Now, I'm no Halloween Grinch. If you saw my house, you know we go all out with Halloween directions. 12-foot-tall ghosts, gravestones, the works. But I do regret the loss of a sense of gravity on this high feast of the church year. This is not just some ordinary day. This is ranked in the church calendar with Christmas and with Easter. This is a big deal. So kudos for showing up. But like the other high feasts of the church year, we have allowed them to become trivial because we either feel uncomfortable with the gravity of the commemoration behind them or because we simply don't know what else to do. Sam Portuaro, an Episcopal priest who's actually from High Point, wasn't Episcopalian when he was growing up here, but from High Point and years served as chaplain to the university at the University of Chicago, he writes that we have indeed trivialized all that we don't fully comprehend or are scared to confront. And that's how we've dealt with it. We've allowed even Christmas and Easter, the days for commemoration of those most high and lofty theological ideas of the incarnation and the resurrection, to become days of shopping malls and bunnies made out of chocolate. Perhaps we're embarrassed at some core level by the claims that our faith makes for us. They may be cause for persecution by non-believers. And if we trivialize them, well, they become more palatable to everyone, and it makes it easier to function in the world today. Portraro contends that one of the other reasons that we've allowed our faith to become trivialized is a fear of disappointment. We've no way of proving that what we believe as Christians about the life hereafter is true, and so we allow our commemorations to become about something simpler and less risky. Dress up and candy don't threaten us the way that pondering the life eternal of our dead loved ones does. In Portraro's words, it is hard to look death in the face and to say to death, I know I shall see you again. But it is harder still to scan the flickering light of life's vitality in the face of a dying friend and say, I know I shall see you again. And so we need days like All Saints to remind us, even if lightheartedly, that we will see each other again, that we can take it with us in some respects. The love that binds us so closely together while we are living here on earth, that's God's love. And God's love never disappears. And what God has created and made is never lost, but is held in the mind of God until that great getting up day when the kingdom is established in its fullness. And even now, those who have already run this race, Paul tells us, are there in the great throngs, in the stands of the arenas of heaven, cheering us on as we run this race ourselves. And it is this otherworldly sense of all saints that draws us, though we may not comprehend it completely, towards the ultimate reality of God and our life eternal in God. And so on this day, we will remind each other of our places in God's kingdom, places established for us in our baptisms. And we will join together with little Margaret, who is being baptized, and reaffirm our own baptismal promises. We will say those words that were first uttered, perhaps even for us if we were infants, at our own baptisms. On your way out of church, stop by and feel that water in the font. Touch it. Make the sign of the cross. Just touch it if that weirds you out. But touch it nonetheless, and be reminded of that water that washed you once and for all and enabled you to stand with all of God's saints, famous and unfamous, and some infamous, in that heavenly worship, praising God forever. On this day, we celebrate all God's saints, living and dead. And we await that day when we are all joined together in perfection in God. And until then, the party has already begun. The Lamb is already seated in victory on the throne. And we are invited to dine with that heavenly chorus every time we gather here. So as you come forward today and are fed with the food of heaven, be reminded that this is your foretaste of the party that is already happening, that we are already a part of, even if we don't clearly see it on this side of existence. And give thanks for all the saints, those known and dear to us, those known only in textbook and history books, those whose lives have set the world on fire with the light of Christ, that we might be here as us in this place today, and that we in turn might set the world on fire for generations to come.